Initial Thoughts is a spoiler-free movie review series. All opinions are my own.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Initial Thoughts, a series in which we talk about films as and when they are released. Today's film we're talking about is the latest MCU entry, Thunderbolts, which is directed by Jake Schreier and stars Florence Pugh, Sebastian Stan, and David Harbour. So nowadays, when I think of what is going to be released every year in the cinemas, what can I expect? Something that we can always expect is a few MCU entries. Yes, that wasn't the case for last year with just Deadpool and Wolverine as kind of almost like a reset point, a breather, a little bit of, okay, let's take a little bit of time. Just one movie that didn't seem to be that connected, was almost its own thing, and more of a celebration of the end of the Fox ownership of those Marvel characters. And then we start again fresh here in 2025. And earlier in the year, we had Captain America Brave New World. The Initial Thoughts videos on the channel. I talked about that in depth, and for me, it wasn't the return to form I had hoped it would be. And that kind of continues throughout all of the MCU films since Endgame. You know, when you think about the films that have been released since Endgame, there's been a lot. And let's be frank, a lot of them have not been that great. They vary from okay to forgettable almost, and you know, there a lot of them, and probably the majority of them, are either decent or not great. But however, there's been some real shining lights in there. And I think I talk about this every time we talk about Marvel movies, and I feel like I'm saying the same thing, rinse, repeat, on the hope that there will be more of a consistent through line and a more of a baseline of quality for MCU films to build on in each entry, not a few standouts. More of a consistent, well, they released 3 or 4 films this year and all were great. You know, we've had some good. We've had Spider-Man No Way Home, a great almost closure to the MCU side of Spider-Man, Tom Holland's Spider-Man, and also a celebration of that character with obviously the combination of the 3, and a great celebration of that. A really good film. We had Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, an ending to a beautiful trilogy, and honestly, surprisingly good how well the quality persists throughout all 3 films, especially with the Guardians inclusion in Endgame, Infinity War, and even Thor Love and Thunder. That was really well done. But again, didn't really set the baseline for a wider MCU, okay, let's see what happens next. It was more of a closure. We had Deadpool and Wolverine, as I mentioned last year. Again, more of a closure. And will Hugh Jackman's Wolverine and Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool be incorporated into the MCU going forward? I don't know, is the answer to that. And when you see the casting for Doomsday, it's hard to tell. But something I've been craving for when it comes to the MCU, because when you think about the good times, on the build-up to Infinity War, and even further back, even on the build-up from between Avengers 1 and the Age of Ultron, the films being released then were good. And I know that's very kind of generic to say, but there was more of a consistent through line. Yes, there was the odd film that wasn't that great, sure, but there was always films that you felt built into each other. Whereas so much of the MCU in this last while has been aimless projects, kind of throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. And that kind of aimless, it has lost a lot of its mojo in this last 2 to 3 years for sure. And in that regard, every film that gets released now, in the sense of not the ones that are a close of a trilogy like Guardians 3, you know, but films like Captain America Brave New World, films like Thunderbolts that we'll be talking about today, films like, I mean, even Thor Love and Thunder when it came out, or Black Widow, or, you know, there's been a lot of films that we or even Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. You hope there's going to be some kind of building blocks to go, okay, well, all the films that start following this will be from that original point. They will be from that good building block. And the reason I say all this is because I just really hope that every film I go into now, especially the ones with somewhat of an ensemble cast, can be that. Can be, okay, here's our starting point for this next phase. This is our starting point for what will come, and a good starting point. And while I didn't get that in Brave New World, my hope was that Thunderbolts would be that. A good building block, and also more than that, an enjoyable time. And then I seen the trailers, and the trailers had me sold pretty instantly. I really like the dynamic of the characters. I like the list of characters involved here. You know, not any massive stars, apart from, you could say, Florence Pugh and Sebastian Stan. But again, in both of their roles, Florence Pugh being a side character in the Black Widow movie, admittedly the best part of that film. You know, Sebastian Stan, a good inclusion in every film he's been in, and even one of the best MCU entries there's been in The Winter Soldier, and of course he being one of the biggest parts of the narrative in that. He's never really had the front, you know, he's never been top of the cast, you know what I mean? And I mean that applies to a lot of characters in here. And then you get the comparisons to Suicide Squad, because it's inevitable. You look at this, you've got a ragtime kind of group of characters that it's not clear where they fit. It's not clear where they fit in this next stage of MCU. But harkening back to what I was saying there a moment ago, it's hard to see where anything fits at the moment because it's been such a mess. No, you know, the Infinity Saga, as it was called, the 20-something movies or whatever it was, at least there was some kind of through-line narrative from start to finish, from Iron Man 1 all the way through to Endgame. There was a through line. Yes, there was a few deviations and sways along the line, but it always felt like the same story. Whereas the through line really has been lost since Endgame. A few good projects for sure that I've mentioned, but there really needs a building block. And the reason I've kind of harped on about that fact is because I really, really hoped that Thunderbolts would be that. After Brave New World letting me down, not that I had too much hope for it admittedly, I thought Thunderbolts, when I seen the trailers and I heard the premise, I thought, this is interesting. This is a different kind of gamble. You're not sticking one of your guaranteed stars in there like a Chris Hemsworth. You know, yes, you could say that to a little bit of an extent for Florence Pugh and Sebastian Stan in their roles, but not really. Not fully is probably the better word to use there. But all that being said, I had just really hoped that Thunderbolts would be the return to form that I feel like I've been talking about for the MCU for a long time. You know, even the greatness that we've had, they've never been, okay, what comes next? I can't wait to see what comes next. It was always, what a beautiful ending, or what a beautiful closure to a character or group of characters. And for me, I am very, very, very pleased to say this is finally a win for the MCU. This is finally a win in regards to building characters. This is finally a win in regards to setting the stage for what will come in the upcoming movies. You know, there's 2 Avengers movies on the horizon here. I think it releases on just about a year from now, the first one, Doomsday. And of course, there's so much hype around that. And, you know, with Thunderbolts being almost the one that you wouldn't bank on, almost the one that you wouldn't think would have that quality, and seems like the biggest gamble of the bunch. You know, Captain America, recognised name. Fantastic Four coming out this summer, guaranteed name, albeit a new set of cast and everything like that. Thunderbolts was the one that people kind of went, well, we'll see what happens with that. It could be fun. Honestly, it's a lot more than just fun. Thunderbolts is a really, really enjoyable time. Surprisingly enjoyable. Yes, it has the Marvel quips and the comedy, but it's probably the best it's been done in a long time in a movie of this nature. It has good emotional moments. It has, and this is something I feel like I haven't said for a long time. Barn Guardians, Barn Spider-Man, and even with Deadpool and Wolverine, it was more the comedy that flows with that film. Something that Thunderbolts does better than a lot of the recent ones, and I mean, the majority of the ones since Endgame, it has brilliant character work. Brilliant character work. Now, that doesn't apply to everybody in here. Not everybody gets their time to shine. You know, there's some of the Thunderbolts aren't as fleshed out as others, but we have seen them in previous roles. But there's one true star in here. Yes, there's some great performances around her, but my goodness me, Florence Pugh is brilliant. It's one of the best MCU performances in recent memory, for sure. Her as Yelena has really shone in anything she's been in. She was probably one of the most enjoyable parts of the Hawkeye series. She was definitely, along with David Harbour, who we'll talk about in a moment, was definitely the best part of the Black Widow film. But this is the one for her. And the one for her character. Because you don't need to tell me how good of an actress Florence Pugh is. I've been a big fan of hers for a long, long time. The first film I seen of her was Fighting With My Family a lot of years back. The Paige WWE movie. And I was sold then. And everything, she's one of those... She's quickly becoming one of those actresses. You see her name and you're instantly attracted to the project. For sure. And that alone had me interested in Thunderbolts. But she knocks it out of the park here. It's one of the better performances in an MCU movie that I can think of. And that includes the Infinity Saga. I thought she was absolutely brilliant. She's the glue and also the heart of this film. But the dynamic with the surrounding characters is really worked well. You know, these ensemble characters and casts can be thrown together, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But in here, in Thunderbolts, it really does work. And it works pretty damn quickly. It doesn't take long for these characters to start bouncing off each other, have good chemistry with each other. The dynamics are very clear. They aren't different to their characters when they've appeared before, but there's a bit more depth and a bit more heart to each character. But of course, there is that comic relief, and the comedy, and I don't always say this for Marvel films, the comedy lands most of the time, almost all of the time in this, and most of that comedy comes from David Harbour as Red Guardian. And again, he was hilarious in Black Widow, but he is truly hilarious in this, and his dynamic with the rest of the characters, it brings that joy to an almost... It's a very serious story, and actually, it's a story with a lot more depth than you would think. The main focus is almost tackling loneliness and getting almost trapped in our own heads, and for that kind of depth in a Marvel movie, you know, when we think about what's become the cliche of Marvel, and it's just becomes, you know, a bit throwaway and a bit forgettable, and okay, there's an action scene and that's it. The action scenes in here are pretty good, but the story being told, the narrative, and there's some very, very effective emotional moments throughout this film. I have to say, Thunderbolts really, really impressed me. And I have to say to you, I'm very glad to be saying that, because I don't know about you guys, but I'm at a point with the MCU where you can only have so many chances. You know, you can only have so many chances to build this new foundation for what will come for the next 5, 10, whatever many years that this universe will continue, because inevitably it will. But there's been such a lack of quality over this last while, this last few years, you know, and the odd shining lights, the ones I've mentioned. Another one I forgot to mention is Shang-Chi. But again, it almost feels standalone, because we haven't seen any kind of connection. And not that I'm saying we need big connection and every single hero has to appear in the next film. Not at all. But it just feels like very separate stories, and there's no tale to be told here that connects all the films. But that's up until Thunderbolts. For now, I'm very confident. And I haven't said that for a while about the MCU. I'm confident for what the future will bring. I'm confident for the Fantastic Four. I was very excited for that film anyway, because I would like to see... I like the cast. I like the casting of all 4 of the Fantastic Four. And I would like to see how their dynamic fits in with this. And after Thunderbolts being an enjoyable... And I keep using that term, but it does feel like it, a building block for what will come next in the MCU. And if the MCU's next phase, you know, this next, you know, obviously we've got a few Avengers films, as we say, but also whatever comes next around those, whatever other releases there is to come next year and the year after that and whatever after that, I think we'll look back on Thunderbolts either as a building block for greatness that came to a new resurgence and a real breathing life back into the MCU, or we'll go, Thunderbolts was another enjoyable standalone, but they never really built anything from it. And hopefully hopefully, it's the first one. Hopefully, Thunderbolts is a great time that they then use to build into something even better. But let's get to rating time. I enjoyed Thunderbolts a lot. I think it's one of the strongest MCU entries in a while. I think it's right up there with the best. I mean, it's certainly in that bracket. You know, since Endgame, there's been what, 4? Shang-Chi, Spider-Man No Way Home, Deadpool and Wolverine, and Guardians Volume 3. Thunderbolts is in there with this. Thunderbolts is right there. It's in that category of great. It isn't maybe as good as some of the other ones, for sure. But for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to see what happens next in the MCU. And I was losing faith that I was ever going to be saying that. But rating-wise, as you can see, IMDb is pretty high on this. I'm pretty high on this too. Thunderbolts gets a very worthy, and I'm glad to be saying, an 8 out of 10. A return to form for the MCU, and I'd be very disheartened if they take this and then the next few entries fall flat and we're back to square one. I really hope that isn't the case. But for now, Thunderbolts is a very enjoyable time. I think if you enjoy the MCU, or you have enjoyed the MCU of the past, and you're going to make time to see one MCU film this year, certainly make the time to see this one over Brave New World, that's for sure. I enjoyed this a lot. Performances were great. Story was surprisingly good. The meaning behind the film was also surprisingly deep and surprisingly effective. And overall, a really good time. And another performance I should probably mention before we finish is Lewis Pullman as Bob in the film. Is the only name I'm going to give you in this review. I enjoyed him a lot. I thought he's not an actor I'm familiar with in any way, but I thought he was also definitely the most... While Yelena is the heart of this film, Lewis Pullman's character is probably the most interesting of the bunch. And again, I'm interested to see what comes next. And that applies to the MCU as a whole. So, I'd hoped that in 2025 the MCU would return to form. Yes, I did enjoy Deadpool and Wolverine, but it didn't feel like any kind of a building block. It was more just a closure for Fox. A good closure at that, but a closure in all the same. This feels like a start. This feels like, okay, what have we got coming next? And I'll be there. So yeah, I would recommend Thunderbolts, and I'm glad to be saying that. And yeah, that's been my review of Thunderbolts. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to listen to me talking about a movie. If you want to stick around and hit that subscribe button, I'd appreciate you so much. If you leave a like, let me know you enjoyed this one. All the socials are there. I'm on Twitter, Blue Sky, that's where you'll get my updates. All films are logged in Letterboxd, very active on TikTok, the full works. If you want to follow me on any and all those things, I'd appreciate you so much. And if you do stick around, I will hopefully see you in the next one. Bye, guys.
Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Before you go, here are some of my other videos. For updates and information on upcoming videos, the best place to find us is my Twitter. Much love, everyone.